Can you answer simple questions in English but freeze when someone asks?
So, what happened?
You can say things like, I like it, I agree, I went there yesterday, but when it comes to explain a situation, tell a story, or describe what happened, your mind suddenly goes blank. You know the words, you know the grammar, but you can't explain the situation clearly. If this sounds familiar, don't worry. Today I'll show you why this happens and, more importantly, how to make it much easier. I'm teacher Ludmila, who's never lived in an English-speaking country, yet still managed to reach a C2 level of English. Now, through your friend English, I help learners like you become more confident and fluent speakers. So, let's figure out why explaining complex situations can feel so difficult and what you can do about it. Many English learners think, I don't have enough vocabulary, or my grammar isn't good enough. But that's often not the real problem. When you explain a complex situation, you're doing much more than speaking English. You're trying to remember the situation, organize the events, decide what's important, choose the right words, build correct sentences, and keep the conversation moving. That's a lot for your brain to handle at once. And the more complicated the situation is, the more overwhelmed you can feel. Recently, one of my students wanted to tell me about a business deal. There were 3 people involved: a seller, a buyer, and my student acting as an intermediary. Each person had a different role. Each person had different responsibilities. There were several steps in the process. My student knew exactly what had happened, but explaining it in English was difficult. Not because she didn't know English, but because she was trying to manage too much information at the same time. This is a very common problem. When learners explain a situation, they tend to seek to tell the whole story immediately. Something like, the seller wanted to sell the product. The buyer contacted him, but actually I was involved because he needed me to speak with another person, and then… At this point, even native speakers would struggle to follow. The solution is simple. Don't explain everything at once. Instead, break it into smaller pieces. But how exactly do you do that? What can you do when your mind starts racing and you don't know where to begin? The answer isn't to learn more vocabulary, and it isn't to memorize more grammar rules. What you need is a simple framework. Think of it as a roadmap that helps you organize your thoughts before you start speaking. Here are 5 strategies that can make explaining complex situations much easier. Strategy 1. Identify the people first. Before talking about events, identify the people involved. For example, the seller wanted to sell a machine. The buyer wanted to purchase it. My job was to help them communicate. Now your listener understands the situation. Only then should you explain what happened. Strategy 2. Explain one role at a time. Instead of describing everything together, focus on one person first. For example, the seller prepared the documents. The buyer checked the offer. I communicated between the 2 sides. Notice how much clearer this is. You're organizing the information instead of trying to carry everything in your head at once. Strategy 3. Use labels instead of pronouns. One of the biggest causes of confusion is overusing he and she. For example, he told him that he needed to send him the documents. Who is he? Which documents? Nobody knows. Instead, repeat the labels. The seller told the buyer that the documents were ready. Much clearer. Don't be afraid to repeat words. Clarity is more important than sounding sophisticated. Strategy 4. Follow a simple structure. Whenever you want to explain a complex situation, use this formula. Who? Who was involved? What? What was each person's role? Then, what happened next? Result. What was the final outcome? Let's use our example. One person wanted to sell a machine. Another person wanted to buy it. I acted as an intermediary. First, I contacted both sides. Then, we discussed the details. Finally, they reached an agreement. That's a complete explanation. Simple, clear, effective. Strategy 5. Think in chunks. Many learners try to build an entire paragraph before speaking. Native speakers usually don't. They think one idea at a time. For example, first idea, the seller wanted to sell the machine. Next idea, the buyer was interested. Next idea, I helped them communicate. Next idea, they agreed on the price. One idea, one sentence, then move on. This reduces pressure and makes speaking much easier. Here is something important. If you're struggling to explain a complex situation, it doesn't necessarily mean that your English is weak. Sometimes the situation itself is complicated. Even in your native language, you would probably organize your thoughts before explaining it. So don't judge your English based on how quickly you can explain a complicated story. Instead, focus on making the story simple. When the structure becomes clear, the English often becomes easier too. The next time you need to talk someone through a complicated situation, don't ask yourself, how can I explain everything? Ask yourself, what's the first piece of information my listener needs? And give that piece. And only then move to the next one, step by step, idea by idea. That's how fluent speakers handle complex conversations. And it's a skill you can develop too. Remember, this is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. To help you practice, I've created a worksheet based on today's lesson. It includes activities that will train you organize your thoughts, identify the key information, and explain situations step by step without feeling overwhelmed. You can find it on my website through the link in the description below. If you found this video useful, leave a comment and tell me what's the most difficult thing for you to explain in English. And if you'd like more practical tips to help you speak more clearly and confidently, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next lesson.